others are waiting for the economy to stabilize, smart families are already relocating to North Idaho to build multi-generational compounds that will ensure long-term security. If you aren't looking into this region now, you might be locked out forever. Dun, dun, dun. Hey, if you guys are thinking about moving to North Idaho and you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button, tap the notifications bell so you can stay up to date on all of our latest content. Our real estate team gets calls, texts, emails every single day from people like you trying to learn more about North Idaho. So if you guys are thinking about making that move, shoot us a call, text, or email. Let's get that conversation started. All right, you ready?
Yeah, send it.
Okay, here we go. Why multi-generational families are choosing North Idaho. Man, we have been getting a ton of calls for people starting to look into this realm. I think there's a lot of factors involved here, and there's a lot of things you need to look into before you move or make that move. So we'll jump into that. That's a little bit towards the end. It's funny how we put it towards the end, the best information. But about buying land, if you're planning on splitting it, and what to look out for there, because there are some risks involved. Multi-gen living. Eric, what do you think? I mean, like, we're dealing with a lot of clients like this right now, right?
Dude, it's wild.
What's the benefit for people? Why are they doing this?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons why. I mean, the fact that homes now, if you go purely based off the U.S. dollar and currency, are more expensive than they ever have been traditionally. So I think a lot of it's necessity. I mean, when I found out that 18% of households are multi-gen households,
really?
That's more than quadrupled since 1971.
Whoa. So we're not talking about Somali daycares, right? Because
that's probably gone up. If you look in Minnesota, it's probably 65%. But no, truly, I think that some of it's born sheerly out of necessity. I think you've got, and maybe that counts if grandparents are raising grandkids, which we know happens all over the place. So they're all living under one roof. So I'm sure you're catching some neighborhoods, not what people would typically moving to North Idaho think of as multi-gen. But I've definitely heard people talking about they want a multi-generational homestead. You know, they want a site with sufficient acreage that they could put multiple homes on it. Right? And you knew I was like the trailer park pro when I first became a real estate agent. I'm sure you could do some of that, drop a few double wides out there. Manufactured homes get a hard knock, dude, but some of those are pretty nice right now. But I think a lot of it, dude, is just born out of sheer necessity. It's less expensive. And you can save, rough numbers for like 35 to 36% if you're sharing in a lot.
Sure.
Shared wells are a thing out here. You know, that's an added expense for improvement. If you're already bringing power on, you can split costs. There's options for that.
Yeah, sure. Let me break down a couple of things real quick before we get too much farther. When we're talking about multi-generational living, we're talking about a couple of different things, right? Some of that is a home that's set up for it. That might have a separate living space, you know, down in the walkout basement. It could be a home with an attached or detached ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit, or a property with a guest home on it or an in-law suite. 2 homes on 1 acre. I think there's a video about that, isn't there? 2 homes, 1 acre. You know what I mean? Yeah. So those are some of the things that we're talking about when we say multi-generational living, just to define it.
Yes, ADU. I just left the community development office at Kootenai County. They were extremely helpful, by the way. Anybody out here that's looking at property or just that's your plan, highly recommend just dropping in there and tell them what your plan are. They can talk to you a lot more about the zoning because how it's zoned out here, a lot of these homes and properties are above the aquifer, which has limitations. I wrote this down so I wouldn't jack it up. Let's see if I can find it on here. Subsurface sewage disposal ordinance that's directed by Panhandle Health. You can only have 1 septic system per 5 acres. Part of that is so that it can disseminate. Our aquifer is extremely clean and services almost all of our households and a lot of Spokane. That Rathdrum Aquifer is real. So they want to protect that. So you can only have that 1 septic system on 5 acres. So if your plan is to come out, buy 4 acres and then subdivide it into 2s, you're likely going to run into restrictions.
Would that aquifer roughly Rathdrum, Post Falls, all the way up into Athol?
Yeah. Yep, pretty much. You can find it if you just look up.
I did see a map recently somewhere. Yes,
it's pretty cool. So it doesn't cover all, but it covers quite a bit. You know, if you're anywhere in that, like, you know, Twin Lakes and, you know, anything on the east south of 53, and, you know, all of those are generally going to be covered by the aquifer.
Okay.
Obviously, there are developments out on the prairie, but you just got to be aware of that it can affect your zoning. But that is a great stop, and it should be done during every inspection. You should cruise by community development and let them know what the plans are. One of the things I want to bring up when I talk to her, they aren't calling it ADUs, they're calling it ALUs, like assisted or additional living unit.
Oh,
no. Yeah.
Somebody got offended and got sued by dwelling. That's a very offensive word. So
apparently to us dwarves, that was quite offensive. It's a dwarf dwelling. But there are certain stipulations for that, right? So if you were, let's say you were going to build a home that was 3,000 square feet, and that's your primary residence, You can go up to half that square footage in an ALU. So if you're going to build a shop then, and you want to have a 1,500 square foot ALU, then it just becomes about the limitations for bedrooms on the septic system. So there are still workarounds for that. You just need to understand that when it comes to subdivisions and having a separate septic system and permit, that's where you're really looking for a 10.
Okay.
Right? 10s and 20s. Subdividing 5s gets a lot more challenging.
Which is still very, very attainable out here, finding 10s and 20s.
Harder and harder, though, dude.
Not in Coeur d'Alene, right? That would be very tough, or even Post Falls, but potentially Hauser, Rathdrum, Athol for sure.
Yeah.
So, and then as you go up north, up into the Sandpoint area, in between Sandpoint and Coeur d'Alene, that is very attainable. So.
Right. So, I mean, the big question is, why are these families looking for multi-generation? I think some of it's born out of necessity. The rest of it is there is this strong sense and desire to kind of go back in time a little bit to the way things were, to where grandkids can run across the driveway to grandma and grandpa's property, and they spend a lot more time together in their little family nuclear unit.
It's such a powerful way of life that we're missing out on. And I don't know the factors that got us away from that, but there's so much value in having 3 generations or more on the same property, because exactly that. The grandkids can run over to grandma and grandpa. Grandpa's working in the wood shop. Dad doesn't have time to teach son how to work in the wood shop, but grandpa does.
Yes.
You know,
he's going fishing.
Yeah.
Right.
You can pass these skills on in a much easier way. So I see the draw for that. Like, I wish I could have that. But you know, I think that's a big part of it for a lot of these families, is that then there's the economic and the financial reason, right?
Political persecution. The family that was in here today, I won't use any names, but I said, hey, it's funny, we're actually going to do a video today about that, and you guys are a multi-generational family that are moving over here from one of those states. I said, why is it that you're moving in just to flee the communist freaking structure that's happening there? Yeah. They've worked their entire life, very blue collar, and they don't want to spend their money there. Like, the way it's being spent now is a tough sale. You know, and you've got more educational freedom here. You know, you've got less government intrusion here. When we're talking about the permitting process for building, you know, Kootenai County, and they don't want to tell you no. I know there's some people have had some tough deals with county permitting. It's still a permitting thing, but you don't walk in the office with them wanting to tell you no. They're not looking for an excuse, which I think you run into that in other parts of the country. Yeah,
and just the value of the money saving that you're going to have if you take a 10-acre lot and split it into 2 5s. Grandma and grandpa live on one, you guys live on the other, and potentially sharing a well. Right now you're I mean, a well is $1,000 a foot.
Yeah.
That could add up real quick if you're digging a 400 or 500 foot well. But if you can split it between 2 people, fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, that's a great thing.
And I think it goes both ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, when you look at, you know, professionally and some of the careers out there right now, a lot of times the grandparents are the ones that are retiring at an age with sufficient funds to make this purchase happen. However, they're also getting to that age where they're less ambulatory. One of the saddest group of calls that I ever went on as a cop were going to some of the assisted living facilities out here. Man, and it's brutal. You know, it's God's waiting room, and there's no family around. So on the flip side, you have a younger generation that may not have the financial ability the grandparents do, but you're living on the same property. So when it gets snowy, you need to plow the road, or you need to make sure everything's okay. There's help right there. And every you know, those families, immediate families, still have their separation, but they're close.
Yeah.
They're in their own community, which is awesome.
And you're building a potential for, you know, a legacy property, right? Grandparents pass on, kids get older, get married. Now you can stay in that family compound and just keep those homes being occupied for potentially generations.
Yes.
And I see so much value in that. I was reading something today and it struck me. And this is how I think already, but it really struck me as these baby boomer families that are sitting on, you know, accumulated wealth that they worked really hard for over many years to have, but they're not doing anything with it. And then their kids can't afford to buy a home. Like, if you're in that situation, put that money into your kids, buy them a home. You know, it feels like you're giving them a handout maybe, but in reality, it's very hard for young families to afford homes anywhere these days. And if you can take that money that you were squirreling away for what, like, you're going to die? What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
It's going to go to them anyway. Take that money now, put it into something useful that your kids and grandkids can use. I mean, that makes so much sense to me. I would way rather do that as a parent than die with $2 million in the bank.
Not only that, you're 100% right. You and I've talked about this. I agree. Use it while you're still around. And I think it's a very old school strategy to hang on to it and then just kind of kick it to everybody. And that was the way it was then, especially when it was like gold backed. You're passing that on quite literally to other generations. But now that we've gone to this fiat currency, it's totally different. You should also analyze and scrutinize the estate taxes of the state that you live in. Washington State just went to 35% above a certain margin. That blows away the next. Them and Hawaii are both the worst when it comes to estate taxes, estate taxation. So the way that you do that, and I know there's some CPAs out there who are like, oh, not if you're with me, bro, I got you tax-wise. But they will hammer you on that on the outside. So why not look at it and say, yeah, my kids are struggling for the 20% down on a home. They're fired. I'm fired. But that's somebody trying to move here from Washington.
There you go.
But why not help them with that 20% down initially? That would be awesome, right? Like
that's an excellent investment in your kid's future.
Yes, and then they can still afford it on the back end. And I think that's what a lot are doing. I want to get into a little bit of the zoning out here, some of the common stuff. And even if you're looking, 3, 4, 5 years out, if you're buying, I don't think the land here is going to get any cheaper, man. There's just too much buyer pressure.
Too much.
In Idaho. But if you buy it and you hang on to it and you're taking slow improvements, there is an exception for if you're subdividing for a family member. But as I just found out at community development, you can't do that right after you purchase it. You have to wait for 3 years.
Oh, I've never heard of this.
Yeah, so you can subdivide the 5 for like another family member, and it completely simplifies the process. No survey required, especially if you're not worried about setbacks or anything like that. It just very much simplifies and expedites the process. So buy it, hang on to it, make slow improvements. You're adding power here, you're dropping a well, you're doing some of those things. It can really simplify it for your family a little bit later and set yourselves up.
That's incredible. I literally have never heard of that. So
yep, because I went through the whole thing this time because I want people to be prepared. Not just why multi-generational families are starting to look in Idaho, but then what the process looks like and what you're looking for in land here. Buildability, we've had John and Spencer on, NIE Custom Homes. Those guys talk about the lot. John will always say, there's no perfect, grab it, right? Grab it if it's good in proximity and look at school districts and all of that other stuff. But there's other things that you need to know about. You can actually pull well permits up here. Those are public record. You can also pull septic permits and see what their perk tests, their percolation tests look like. Those are all great. But if you are going to subdivide right away, just know that process costs right around $4,000, and they will require a survey. And it can take 3 to 6 months from the pre-approval spot. So if you're looking at doing the building quickly, get that in pretty early.
Good to know.
Yeah, get that subdivision in there pretty early. Said Kootenai County doesn't want to tell you no, but they still have a process.
Right.
And they're always worried about like stacking homes on homes and developments and stuff like that. So it's interesting, man. I learned a lot in there. Again, I would definitely go into that community planning department, community development, learn from those ladies there. They were very
Is that in the same vicinity as the building department or the same place?
It's actually right next to the DMV.
Okay.
They seem more efficient. DMV is still the DMV, even if it's in Idaho. But yeah, it's literally right outside the door of the DMV.
So, inside, I mean, if you're under contract on land up here, or you're looking to buy land up here, that will be my recommendation to my clients is to, hey, give them a call or go in there, show them the piece of land you're buying, and then gather as much information as possible, right?
Yes. And what's wild, dude, is like you're in this, and I don't mind saying, I mean, roughly 10 acres. Raw, well, I actually had power on it, was about 450 close to town, 15, 20 minutes. I just did one. If you're looking at a 5 that's improved, it's like $399.
It's not much cheaper, right?
Dude, and then you look at the opportunities to subdivide later and, have kind of a plan. And I get it. That's still, Idahoans listen to this. They're like, that's ridiculous. I get it, man. It's supply and demand. But if you can find a solid 10, check out topography, especially when you're looking from distance. Get yourself Onyx or Landglide and just hit the topo section just to see if it's actually usable. See what the buildable.
Those photos in the MLS are very tricky. The ones you're looking at on Realtor.com or whatever, they often don't do a great job of highlighting the topography of the land. And that is when someone's sending me a lot. That's like one of the first things I look at.
Yep.
Is it usable?
And look, I've run out and done plenty of videos on land and just say, man, that looks like it's pretty steep. Let's see what your actual buildable. I've seen plenty of 10-acre lots where the usable section's half an acre.
Yeah.
Right. So those ones are important to go check out.
Right.
But I get it. Like I said, the multi-generation lifestyle, when I think about that, there's a lot of appeal to that.
Hugely. I intend to try to start that with my kids, right? Give them a leg up. I will figure out a way to give them land or whatever. Get them going on that. So selfishly that I can keep them here in North Idaho and they don't leave.
Right. Well, and eventually grandkids will be close. We'll have a little more time. It's nice. And part of the reason I moved here is my mom was a cop in Spokane. She retired with 10 acres out on the east side of Coeur d'Alene, and having grandkids near that's good for families,
It's
man.
golden.
It's huge.
Very good for the kids. Yeah.
So that has been a big draw. I told you in the last couple of months, it's tough because we have a lot of people that want to do multi-gen or at least plan for multi-gen. It's tough to find it's harder to find a good 10. Developers are scooping up, the big 100s, 120s, 140s, and subdividing that themselves. So scooping your own 10 can be challenging.
But they're out there.
They are. Absolutely. Like I said, that one that we just got was cool. Super cool. A quarter mile from friggin' boat launch and fishing. So
It's good living.
yeah, you can find that.
Good living. So if you guys have additional questions about multi-gen living, shoot us an email, text, call, whatever. And then we can kind of talk you through that process and give you resources on this end so that you guys can make an informed decision when it comes time to buy. Seems like a good idea to me. That's a goal I'm heading towards, and a lot of people are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Keep the families tight, man.
And everybody's gonna say, all right, what are lots going for? In your opinion, I look at it like anywhere from 40 to 80K per acre.
Yeah.
Right? Like that seems pretty.
But you can't find a half acre or an acre. It's very hard, right? Those
will be 100.
Yeah. Here's the scoop in Idaho. There's quarter acre lots that the developers buy all of them up, so you can't even find one of those. And then it pretty much jumps up to 5 acres.
Right.
That's about it.
Yep.
So just know that coming into it. You got to have realistic expectations when you're coming up here looking at land.
Wow. It's just, geographically, look at what you're moving to. We're the panhandle of the state.
Yeah.
That is not a wide cut between Washington and Montana, and then you're cutting right through the mountains to the east when you get up over Mullen and Kellogg. So we have limited area, and then it's bracketed by mountains and lakes and everything else. So, and until you get into the high prairie further south, so it's just limited spots. A lot of people want 1 or 2 acre lots. Those are hard to find.
Very.
Finding the zoning for that is what's tough.
Yeah.
Just because over the aquifer they only want that septic system over 5s, which is understandable. We don't have water problems here. We're blessed. Right, and hopefully it stays that way. No freaking data centers here. It's a different podcast. But yeah, that's generally what restricts it, or why you see, why land values are high here. It's because they aren't going to pump 20 houses onto a 5 acre piece above the aquifer.
Yeah, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, same here. I
keep it that
don't
way.
want to lose that. It just makes things a little more expensive, and sorry for that. Yep.
All right. Well, hope that was helpful. Shoot us a call, text, email if you guys have further questions or are thinking about making the move up here. We got you covered. Later.
Cheers, guys.